Star Trek's new movie continues the franchise curse that started 46 years ago. Star Trek Section 31 hasn't been received all that well, which continues an unfortunate franchise trend that has plagued the saga since its first movie back in 1979. Since reuniting Star Trek, the original series cast for the franchise's first feature-length installment, a fascinating pattern has emerged concerning every Star Trek movie that has followed, including the 1979 effort. So, although the Star Trek Section 31 cast and crew wouldn't have intentionally tried to add to this streak, it only makes the fact that it happened anyway even more interesting. Star Trek Section 31's ending makes it very clear that the movie isn't intended to be the saga's final feature-length project. In fact, the straight-to-streaming movie teases a Star Trek Section 31 sequel, which could, in turn, spawn another movie to continue the story. Although Section 31 has the benefit of exploring a lost era of the Star Trek timeline, a sequel still may not be a very good idea. On the other hand, it could actually be a really good plan if the series' weird pattern continues to flourish. Star Trek's movie pattern explained. Although Star Trek, the motion picture sent ripples of excitement through the fan base after years of inactivity, it's still generally seen as a lukewarm movie. Thankfully, the immediate sequel, 1982 Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, immediately validated the decision to take Star Trek to the big screen. After that, subsequent movies followed the same pattern as the first two. There would be a bad Star Trek movie, then a bad one, then a good one, and so on. However, there was something of a reprieve in this strangely consistent phenomenon thanks to 2002 Star Trek Nemesis. Star Trek Nemesis was the second TNG-era movie in a row to disappoint after 1998's letdown Star Trek Insurrection. It performed so badly that it ended up being the last Star Trek movie for years. Eventually, J.J. Abrams resurrected the movie branch of the franchise with 2009's Star Trek. The first effort to be set in the Kelvin timeline was widely praised, so it also brought back the bad then good pattern 17 years after Nemesis flopped. Then, history resumed as it often had, and 2013's Star Trek Into Darkness failed to live up to the 2009 movie's good name before the Kelvin timeline movies became a trilogy with the success of Star Trek Beyond in 2016. If Star Trek Section 31 had performed well, then the pattern would have been broken for a second time. Unfortunately, it has been hugely criticized for several reasons. So, Nemesis remains the outlier in terms of the pattern being 100% consistent. Section 31's reviews confirm it's a weaker Star Trek movie after Star Trek Beyond. Movie taste is very subjective. Just because a project is widely accepted as either good or bad, that doesn't mean there aren't people who believe the opposite. Plus, critical reception can often be very different from how fans enjoy or dislike a movie. So, all sides of the argument need to be considered when arriving at a final decision about whether Star Trek Section 31 is an improvement over Star Trek Beyond, or whether the Michelle Yeoh-led effort bucks the trend and gives the franchise two good movies in a row. Star Trek Beyond has a score of 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the fans rate it only slightly lower at 80%. When weighed up against Section 31's ratings, it's clear to see which movie is far superior. One of the most succinct ways of objectively proving Star Trek Section 31 is weaker than its most recent predecessor is by heading to one of the internet's most high-profile review sites, Rotten Tomatoes. Sadly, Section 31's Rotten Tomatoes score sits at just 23%, and the combined audience reviews value the effort even less at 17%. On the other hand, Star Trek Beyond has a score of 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the fans rate it only slightly lower at 80%. When weighed up against Section 31's ratings, it's clear to see which movie is far superior. In the vast, star-studded expanse of pop culture history, Star Trek is a constellation all its own. From its humble beginnings as a 3-season television show in the 1960s to a multimedia empire spanning generations, Trek has boldly gone where few franchises have gone before. But for all its achievements, there's one lingering anomaly that refuses to disappear. The Star Trek movie curse, a pattern of underwhelming, odd-numbered films that began nearly 5 decades ago. Now, with the latest installment hitting the galaxy, it seems the curse lives on. This curse isn't just a fan myth, It's become a part of Trek lore, whispered across bridge stations and convention halls like a bad omen from the Mirror universe. For the uninitiated, the Star Trek movie curse refers to the pattern that emerged after the release of the first 6 Trek films featuring the original cast. The odd-numbered entries, The Motion Picture 1979, The Search for Spock 1984, and The Final Frontier 1989, were widely considered inferior to their even-numbered counterparts, The Wrath of Khan, The Voyage Home, and The Undiscovered Country. It was a pattern so distinct that even Star Trek insiders began acknowledging it. Fans and critics alike started watching each new film with cautious optimism, hoping the streak would finally be broken. But like a stubborn case of tribbles, the curse persisted, shape-shifting over time but never truly disappearing. And now in 2025, with the arrival of the latest Trek film tentatively titled Star Trek Origins, the franchise once again finds itself caught in the same gravitational pull of disappointment. Despite a promising concept and a stellar cast, Origins feels less like a warp-speed adventure and more like a shuttlecraft spinning in circles. The film attempts to fuse the youthful energy of the Kelvin timeline with the deep philosophical undertones of the franchise's earliest entries, but instead ends up lost somewhere in a temporal rift of tonal confusion. The pacing is inconsistent, the character arcs feel half-baked, and the story lacks the sense of wonder that once defined the best of Trek. And herein lies the problem. Star Trek has always been a franchise caught between two impulses, its cerebral roots and its action-heavy, blockbuster ambitions. With Star Wars setting the gold standard for sci-fi spectacle, Star Trek has often felt pressure to keep up, even if it means compromising what made it unique in the first place. The franchise's cinematic ventures, especially in the post-reboot era, have leaned increasingly toward phaser shootouts and lens flares rather than moral dilemmas and utopian ideals. But the curse isn't just about quality, it's also about timing. The production of each Star Trek movie has often been plagued by behind-the-scenes turbulence, shifting creative teams, budget concerns, and studio indecision. Origins is no different. Its journey from script to screen was marked by director swaps, script rewrites, and multiple delays. By the time it reached theaters, it felt less like a labor of love and more like a product of compromise. To be fair, not everything about Origins is a misfire. The visuals are stunning, Trek has never looked better, and the score by Michael Giacchino is an auditory triumph. There are glimmers of greatness in a few character moments, especially a scene where a young Spock grapples with the burden of legacy. But those moments are fleeting, buried under a narrative that feels unsure of itself. One might wonder if the franchise is simply too big, too sacred, and too sprawling for any single film to satisfy both longtime fans and new audiences. With dozens of series, timelines, and iterations, Star Trek has become a galaxy unto itself. Trying to navigate it without hitting narrative turbulence is no small feat. And yet, the best entries, The Wrath of Khan, First Contact, even 2009's reboot, managed to do just that. So why does the curse persist? Maybe it's because Star Trek was never meant to be a movie franchise. Its natural home is on television, where stories can unfold gradually, characters can evolve, and themes can be explored in depth. It's no coincidence that the recent resurgence of Trek on streaming platforms, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy, has been met with far more consistent praise. These series capture the spirit of exploration and hope that John Roddenberry envisioned, something the movies often struggle to replicate in a 2-hour runtime. As the lights dim on Origins and fans,